I went to my very first 2-day 40k tournament with my very silly Raven Guard Successors, the Screaming Ravens, and an army list consisting of 18 Centurions. The South Coast Super Major is a massive 40k tournament with over 250 participants battling it out over 2 days across 5 games. And on a whim, I decided that I wanted to give it a go, despite having very recently come to the conclusion that a 2-day tournament would probably just be too much for me. Not only did I decide to attend on a whim, I also decided I wanted to take my ridiculous 18 Centurion list, which meant that a week before the tournament I had to buy, build, and paint 6 more Centurions and 2 repulsors for that list to work. I was intending to have this event be the last flight of my Storm Raven, but my ADHD brain decided to pull what is known as a pro gamer move, and I couldn't get the idea of rocking up with an irresponsible number of chonky lads to my first big event, so yeah, I had some preparation to do. Today, I'll be going through my experience at a big event like this, explaining my creative army list, and discussing the 5 games I played and what I learned over the 2 days of intense Warhammer playing Warhammer. I first want to be really clear about something that might be a shock to many of you. I had loads of fun. Like, this is probably one of the coolest events I've ever had a chance to go to. I met some awesome people, and even in defeat, every game I played was fun. I'm going to try not to badger on too much about the fun I had, but I really want to make sure that everyone is aware that competitive 40k isn't the boogeyman that you might expect. I played some of the best players in the world and got completely obliterated, but it was still a ton of fun, and I had a great experience because, at the end of the day, this is a room of hundreds of people who are here to play Warhammer. Not only are people here to play the game they like, this is a social event where meeting new people is pretty much guaranteed, so everyone is courteous and friendly and a joy to chat to and play against. The reason I want to talk about how much fun I had is because when I see comments saying things like, this is why I don't go to tournaments, or this is why I'm glad I only collect, or this is why I don't play the game, it makes me feel bad because that's not what I want to see and that's not what I'm trying to portray. I'm not saying all this to diminish other people's experiences, but I think a lot of concerns about competitive tournament play are overblown. I played in the Tabletop Tactics 1-day league events before, but those are small, and as they aren't fed into the official overall competitive ranking things, there's less incentive to be try-hard, and people are there because they also want to meet the people they're a fan of. So going to a big proper event like this did give me a certain amount of worry that I'd just be playing the kinds of players you hear stories about. But I'm happy to report that that simply was not the case. The event was held in a massive sports hall, and it was really loud. It was pretty overwhelming sometimes. As I went alone, I did the introvert thing of trying to find someone I knew so I could latch onto them like a lost puppy. And lucky for me, I've managed to find Grudgehammer Wargaming's Ben, who you might remember from my previous tournament as the excellent Votan player. Grudgehammer Ben was just one of the many awesome people I got to meet and chat to, so shout out to him, Luis, Archie, Brett, all of my opponents, as well as anyone who I got to chat with who I didn't get the names of. Or probably forgot the names of because you probably told me, but I'm terrible with the names, so sorry about that. Whilst I praised the event, the atmosphere, and all the cool people I met, there are negatives. And honestly, these negatives are self-inflicted and something that you need to be aware of if you're planning to attend a tournament like this. If I could give you one piece of advice, it would be this. Sit the fuck down. A lot of advice gets bandied about for these kinds of events in one category of self-preservation. Lots of hydration, snacks, comfortable shoes, take any painkillers or medication you need, and sitting down is on that list. But I kind of think it's understated versus something like hydration, which, yes, you should hydrate because otherwise you die. In fact, it's so important that I'm going to hydrate right now, and you should too. This is a long video. Anyway, yes, people talk about sitting down when you're able to because you're going to be on your feet for hours, but what people don't really talk about is how surprisingly difficult that is. Not because chairs are at a premium, every table had a chair for each player, but because you'll literally just straight up forget to do it. With hydration, you'll start to feel the effects of that, and that will remind you to drink. Your throat will get sore from having to talk loudly over the din of the hall. You'll get a headache if you don't have enough fluids in you, but your back and knees won't remind you to sit down until after you get home. I spent the entire first day from 8:30 in the morning to 7:30 in the evening without sitting down a single time because I was engrossed in the game. In each game individually, you don't think about sitting down because, at least for me, I play pretty much every game standing up because it's easier. But doing that 3 times in a row after also not sitting down for lunch because you walked to the nearby corner shop for a filling destroying cheap sandwich, let me get that fixed, Archie, sorry about that, means that for an old, withered, mid-30s, sedentary nerd like myself, your back and legs are going to hate you forever. On day 2, I had to, out loud, tell myself to sit down when I could. Trust me, it's not enough for someone else to tell you that you should sit down. My advice is to remind yourself out loud to sit down. My other piece of advice would be to get yourself an amazing MDF carry case like the Mag Case 2.0 from table.stronghold.com. Is this actually true advice or just a dodgy segue into an ad read? Why not both? To find out, you'll just have to watch the sponsor time. Normally, I do some sort of wacky boobery for these ad reads to tell you about Table.Stronghold and their cases and terrain, but genuinely, my Mag Case 2.0 was amazing for this tournament. It's relatively lightweight for how strong it is. The adjustable trays are awesome and can fit my entire army with plenty of space, making it easy to get my models out and put them away after each game. You can get 25% off with code PAUL25, and there's free shipping to the USA, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and most of the EU. Yeah, that's it. Nothing weird in this one. Just a no-nonsense, straight-down-the-line recommendation. Go to tabletopstronghold.com or click the link below to get yourself an MDF case that utilizes the power of... Okay, that's enough rambling about my experience. I had a good time, met some awesome people, and my back hurt for at least 3 days afterwards. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of the actual 40k and talk about my 18 Centurions streaming Raven Masterpiece, this very silly army list. If you've seen any of my other game recaps, then this list isn't too dissimilar to those. The main bulk of this is what I've been running for a while. 10 Vanguard Veterans, 5 Jump Intercessors, Intercessors, Shrike, Phobos Lieutenant, that Techmarine, 2 lots of 3 Assault Centurions, and a big block of 6 Devastate Centurions in the Vanguard Spearhead detachment. The plan is mostly to use the tricks of the detachment to get a big block of Devastate Centurions moving, some Assault Centurions up the board, Intercessors for actions, and then dropping in deep striking jump pack units to keep the opponent on their toes to mimic that Screaming Raven's flavor of appearing unexpectedly out of nowhere under the cover of an endless cacophony of big, chunky Space Marines being thrown in your face. In order to reach new heights of Centurion density, my usual Storm Raven and Brutalis Death Drop combo unfortunately had to be cut in order to make room for some new kids on the block. 6 more Devastate Centurions in 2 units of 3 models and 2 Repulsors. So what's the plan with these? Repulsors can carry the Assault Centurion, so instead of just 1 unit in the Storm Raven, both of them can move up, providing some more redundancy in that tanky front line. Repulsors are slower than Storm Ravens, but they're toughness 12 with 2 extra wounds, similar firepower, and 100 points cheaper. They also have Emergency Embarkation, allowing any unit with every model within 3 inches to hop back in when they are targeted to be charged. Also, Repulsors aren't an absolute nightmare to navigate around the terrain and enemy units like the Storm Raven is, which helped me not get frustrated with that nightmarish flying brick. Wanted to hurl it through the nearest wall because its wings just cannot fit anywhere. One of the biggest flaws of my list was that if you tag the 6 Devastate Centurions, they were stuck the whole game. So I figured having more of them would make that less impactful. Tying up 3 Devastate Centurions is annoying, but that means the 6th blob is free to do its teleporting shenanigans and start hopping around, taking up key units before disappearing into the board edge and appearing elsewhere like some sort of cheap anime cliche. The jump pack units all start in Deep Strike with the 5-strong Shrike Bomb rather than the full 10, which I found worked a lot better. The Techmarine would buff up a Repulsor and try to follow along, and one of the Intercessor squads would hold my home objective, whilst the other one with the Phobos Lieutenant would use the more aggressive movement abilities to get objectives and tag some enemies for their multi-spectrum array ability. That's the basic idea of the list, which I thought actually sounded not terrible. The 1-4 record shows that in hindsight it kind of was, but as we'll see, my ideas on how this list operates and my plans evolved over the course of the 5 games, as well as learning a lot of very valuable lessons into how to pilot such a different army, and honestly just 40k in general. My first opponent was on table 1, officially making me a top table player and therefore in my rightful position as one of the best players in the world. For all of about the hour it took for Ben Jones to systematically dismantle me in 3 battle rounds. There really isn't much to glean from this game. It was just a complete mismatch in both army and player. My ragtag meme list versus the broken metal list, and a first-time Super Mage participant versus a multi-time champion. Despite that, it was still a fun game, just from the perspective of seeing how the pro players work, and also just being able to chat to Ben. There isn't much need to analyze this game beyond what I've talked about in this recent video, so go watch that if you want to see what it's about. Something I want to add, though, is about the way Ben played. When I play 40k, I generally have to, think about what I'm doing, try and work out what the best play is, and that can lead to mistakes in hindsight, which I learned from. When Ben played, I don't think I once saw him have to stop and think. He just did. Part of this is just practice, of course, but it seemed like he had already formulated in his head what he was going to do before it got to his turn, so he could just do it. Now, this is something you see as advice to plan your turn in your opponent's turn so you aren't caught flat-footed and causes you to panic or waste time. But that advice is kind of meaningless for new players like me because it's a very tricky skill to learn. Part of this is that I'm focusing on what Ben is saying and doing and rolling the million saving throws I had to do because of all that Dakka, which gave me very little time to think about my own game. A worry for new players is trying to understand everything that's going on, and by not really knowing what my opponent did, I was trying to learn that and Ben was explaining that to me, but When it was my turn, Ben already knew what my units do, so he only really had to focus on the game plan and not absorbing a bunch of new unit information. And also by knowing my army and what my units do, he can better plan what best things from his army should be put where. This might seem like it's impossible to go up against, but most players will help you and provide you with the information as requested, so you don't need to worry about learning every army ever. And as you play more, you'll gain a bigger bank of knowledge to help you in future games. The other aspect of this is that I'm playing Space Marines, which I think basically everyone has played against, and the people who go to many tournaments have probably played against them so often they understand it. Not only that, I was playing Vanguard Spearhead with Centurions, which was actually a combo that had been used by top players for months as part of the Vanguard Ultramarines lists featuring Uriel Ventress, including Ben and another one of my opponents, so these were well explored lists in the pro scene. Of course, they only used the Cowards version, so my Screaming Raven special still had some tricks up its sleeve, but not nearly enough to throw Ben off his game, and it was a very speedy 36-100 defeat, which isn't horrific overall, but pretty much expected. Weirdly, that score is kind of familiar. The last time I got completely obliterated by someone was actually my last tournament against Mark's Aeldari, where I also lost exactly 36-100. Oh, man, those Aspect Host Aeldari were no joke. I'd hate to have to play against that after just being completely demolished by more Dakka. Anyway, it's after lunch. Who's my next opponent? Fortunately, Aeldari is a very dense codex, so Jared's list had a lot of new things that made this more interesting for me, with striking Scorpions, sweeping Hawks, Wind Riders, a Falcon, and a Wraithlord. Lots of Rangers for objectives, and some of the more standard tricks included Hugin to go with those terrifying fire dragons. Also, fortunately, Jared was a super nice guy, and even offered to be a nice cream egg in this trying time. I was going second, which, according to my stats, is not a good sign, as I've never won going second, and Jared got his striking Scorpions pretty far up with all their tricks, but otherwise played relatively cagey. This is a good chance to talk about what my army does well and what it does badly. My army is relatively tanky, but very slow, so it can weather a decent amount of offense, but very vulnerable to getting locked in. Even with my many destruct tricks and repositioning, that doesn't really help actually move my line of scrimmage forward into my enemy's face. So when stuff comes at me, I can weather it and fight back, but normally too late to actually turn the game around. We saw this in my game 3 in the previous tournament. This game also acts as a good primer to highlight my primary scores across the tournament. The main objective was Purge the Foe, which meant a lot of the points for the primary were for killing rather than just holding objectives, which is good for me, as whilst Jared was able to take good ball control, he played far back enough that he couldn't kill any of my units, but had enough stuff forward for me to take things out and get those points. Meaning that overall the game was very close, and in fact by the end of the game we had tied on primary. That meant it was down to secondaries. As Jared hadn't come at me full force, that meant I was able to get my teleporting Devastating Centurions online without being stuck, which is where this list really shines. Jared was hitting back though with his very scary units. The Fire Dragons and Fugal were still horrifying, and Jane Zar refused to die, slowing me down in battle rounds 2 and 3. His Swooping Hawks and Baharoth were able to get some good scoring in my backline and remove my home field protectors, but were unable to fully capitalize on it before the Centurion reinforcements arrived. One thing that came up during this game that seemed to curse us both was the 2-up abilities. Some units have abilities like this, where you can do something and it happens if you just don't roll a 1. In this game, neither of my Incursor Mines went off, rolling a 1 both times. But that's a few mortal wounds. It's annoying, but it's not the worst thing in the world. You know what's worse? When you have a very powerful character that regenerates on death if you just roll a 2+. Dice. Am I right? This game was a very close back and forth, with my battle plans really coming alive, getting my Centurions all around the board to get those points, and it was the final turn that really was the decider here. Primary is scored at the end of your command phase, which is near the start of the turn, except if you go second, in which case you score primary at the end of the 5th round. This is because the person going first scores first in battle round 2, after you probably didn't have much you can do to respond to it in your first turn, so it's a nice way to balance it out. This played very well in my favor to give me the chance to potentially win. Going into my turn 5, the score was currently 65-85. But obviously, I hadn't scored my primary yet. Jared also had one mission that was ongoing that could give him another 3 points using his Falcon. In his turn 5, he attempted to get Storm Hostile Objective on my home objective, which is where Fugin's inability to stand up came into play. However, Jared had made an error, moving his Dark Reapers away from this objective to take some shots at some of my Centurions. This left a small enough gap where I could bring on my 6-man Centurions onto that objective and in range of both them and his Falcon doing the objective. This meant that I was able to hold 3 objectives, which was more than Jared, for the full 8 points on that part. If I was able to kill his Falcon and 1 other unit, I'd get the 8 points for killing 1 and more units for the full 16. Now I just need at least 5 points on my secondaries. Now, I'm not saying that a single rolled 1 made all the difference and Fugan getting back up would have absolutely caused me problems, but the fact I drew Defend Stronghold on my now untouched home objective does somewhat rub salt into the wound. If I stop Sabotage, though, I'd still be a point short, so hopefully this last secondary can get me those 2 points. Marked for death. Well, shit, that's annoying. Jared has a lot of units still in cover on his back edge, and it's fully screened. I'll have to send a VP and get something else. Assassination. All his characters are dead, so this is instantly scored. Damn, if only I had one character left that might have had a chance of living, that would have been really nice for Jared. Fugan's unfortunately very quenchable resolve had just cost Jared the game, and after my Centurions easily dispatched the remaining units in the open because Centurions are the best, what else did you expect? This was a very close and exciting game that ends 89-85 and marks my first win going second. I've recorded in the app. I don't remember. I may have won going second in another game. After initially rejecting Jared's offer of his cream egg, I felt like I deserved it now that I've won, and when he offered again, I did take one. I didn't eat it. I took it home to who was very appreciative. Jared was an excellent opponent with an amazingly painted army. His Wraithlord especially looked fantastic, and I'd wish I'd taken more photos. So Jared, if you're out there, please post some pictures for everyone to see it. Your army looks awesome. One thing about going to these tournaments is that I'm still not very used to taking pictures. I keep forgetting because of all of these other things I'm trying to remember, like sitting down. Also focusing on having to be social with strangers, but it's fortunate that I made a gimmick out of drawing stuff badly instead, so that was good foresight on my part. No, it's not. It's just a convenient excuse at best and a side effect of my incompetence at worst. But still, I offered my victory, and after a quick break, it was time for round 3, the final game of day 1. At this point, I was pretty tired, but unlike the one-day events I've done before, there wasn't a second wind that comes with seeing the finish line. Instead, there was the realization that this was just the halfway point, and we'd be doing all of this again tomorrow. The mood in the hall was still good and positive, but people were tired and saving their energy so they could actually make it through day 2. Someone came up to me as I was arriving at my table to tell me he likes my videos and watches them when they come out, so thank you, that person. Sorry I didn't get your name. I included this bit partly to say thanks again, but also to feed my overly inflated ego. See, I'm a big shot. I'm a big boy YouTuber now. I was name dropped in a Norspec's Tactics video. My opinion has more value than yours. Right? In any case, whatever ego I might have had was about to be completely decimated by my third opponent, Adam and his World Eaters, an army that I've never played against, but I was scared of. I'd heard tales of Angron's might, so I was trying to think of how I'd deal with that before realizing that Adam did not bring Angron. Now, this can really only mean 2 things. Either A, Adam is a new player who hasn't got Angron or doesn't understand how amazing Angron is, or B, Adam knows exactly what he's doing to the point that his plan doesn't even need Angron. Judging by Adam's fancy-looking Mind Goblin team shirt, I'm going to go with B. And yeah, I didn't take any pictures of this game at all because of the aforementioned tiredness, but I didn't really need to. You know how in the previous game I said the thing my army struggles with is being caged in? Well, Adam took great advantage of that fact and basically put me in the corn hell in a cell for 5 rounds while he just ran away with the victory. This was an extra objective taken hold. So if you thought my previous game had some lacking primary, oh boy. Adam used his 8-bound to great effect, getting into melee with everything he could, and there wasn't much I could do to stop it. Jumping my Centurions around only really got 1 kill before being jumped on themselves, and my deep strike units had no good target. I could only really get a few points before being run down, leading to an ultra quick 43-99 defeat. At least I stopped another 100. This was still a fun game, albeit a quieter one. Fatigue had set in, and it was clear that a quick game with less chat would do us both good, so we could get off early to get some well-deserved rest. But Adam was still a super nice guy and basically said that this was essentially the worst matchup I could have gotten. The next day, after being rejuvenated by a proper English breakfast, Adam was nice enough to come up to me whilst I was waiting outside for day 2 to chat more and talk about the game, but also leave a nice comment on the stream I did talk about the event where he went into some more details. It turns out that Adam was practicing to get onto Team England with Vanguard Ultramarines for the Uriel Venture stuff, meaning that all of the tricks I have, he was very much aware of. So going into this, it wasn't just going to be a hard matchup, there was also a massive gulf of skill and knowledge levels. The truth is, the game was rigged from the start. So, yeah. World Eaters are terrifying and probably my worst matchup, and for some reason I can't stop going against these tournament veterans. But I mean, this is my first time playing against World Eaters, and there's no way I'd get unlucky enough to go against them twice in one tournament. That'd be ridiculous. Still, it was a great game. Adam is a very good player, and it was good to learn a fairly fundamental thing about my list very quickly, and extra time to go home, eat a Parmo, and completely crash. I woke up the next day surprisingly okay, still a bit groggy, but awake enough to get myself to the venue for day 2. When I arrived, I had a look at what I was going to be up against for the first game of the day. Yeah, you probably saw this coming. Game 4 was once again against a very fast, very red, very bloody melee army. Except you didn't see shit because it was Blood Angels, not World Eaters. Come on, don't be so ridiculous. There's no way I'm that unlucky to get another World Eaters. Oh, but wait, my opponent is one of Ben Jones's teammates from Vanguard Tactics, another tournament veteran who has also now been warned by the best player at the tournament and his entire team about my very specific list and what to watch out for. Great news! As you should be used to me saying by now, my opponent, Nathan, was a super nice guy, and this was another great game. Blood Angels is something that, like Aeldari, I have become familiar with recently, so this was another army that I at least had some experience with. And no Sanguinor in this list, which is nice because that guy is horrifying. Instead, lots of Death Company. But still, it's a list that could do some serious hurt to me, with fast stuff to lock me down in melee and a good chunk of scoring units and reserve plays. The dice in this game had a couple of fun moments. With a reroll, I managed to get a long bomb 11-inch charge for my Assault Centurions into his second Ballistas Dreadnought, annihilating it before being instantly melted by terrible saves against Dante's shooting. I also noticed in that same charge phase that one of my repulsors was 12 inches away from a lone jump pack intercessor that I nearly killed the full squad of, so I figured, hey, why not? Might as well give it a go. Might get lucky. Oof. Sorry, Nathan. Who am I kidding? I'm not sorry. That was awesome. Hog, motherfucker. The story of this game, though, was once again the primary, with Nathan just taking an absolute stranglehold on the objectives in No Man's Land. I managed to park a Redemptor on the middle objective, eventually giving me some points, but the others have been locked down by all of the Blood Angels' nasty flying lads and quick scouts. This game taught me probably the most valuable tactic that I'll be taking forward. Deep Strike is kind of a trap. Sure, Nathan had a ton of units, had Deep Strike, Sanguinary Guard, Jump Pack Intercessors, Death Company, Reavers, but he started all of them on the board. I, on the other hand, always by default just shove all of my jump units into Deep Strike, imagining that their ability to get on the board anywhere is a huge advantage for getting extra objectives like behind enemy lines, finding pockets to get some damage into the opponent's backline. However, every time I do that, I manage to do one thing before being turned on. Nathan, on the other hand, had all of these units that could spread out, take objectives, complete actions, and set up a massive presence that I had to fight through. And the issue there is that dropping one of my units down to contest is always going to be against several of Nathan's. Deep Strike is nice, but jump back units are fast. A 12-inch move that can be used on turn 1 if you start them on the board. I've been going far too hard on Deep Strike, thinking that I have to use it because what's the point of not using it? But in fact, it's a nice to have. It isn't that useful if you don't have other units backing it up. My Incursors and Centurions aren't really there to do that. I did get the Teleport Centurions online though in this game, and I managed to take advantage of a misplay from Nathan leaving his 6-strong Dante-led Sanguinary Guard poking out slightly from behind a ruin. I was able to drop down the Ocarina of Time to Die squad to completely delete that entire unit and Dante, which was the big thing that Nathan's teammates warned him about. But that gave me an opening to start pulling the game back. With my repulsor parked in the center, I could start getting my army around the flank onto this objective and finally start holding more and get that primary up. But unfortunately, it was just too little too late. An excellent play by Nathan to wrap my repulsor with his Death Company meant I was stuck and slowly being beaten to death, not allowing me to properly hold that objective and having no way in my round 5 to try and take it back by the end of the turn. I actually managed to get more secondary points than Nathan in the end and did a good chunk of damage to his army, and I had a lot of Centurions left on the board, but that lack of early game pressure meant that the primary was severely lacking. A 66-88 defeat, but a much more positive loss after yesterday's 2 complete shellackings. Nathan and I chatted after the game and discussed the strategy of starting more stuff on the board to help get that early pressure. This is why I love going to tournaments like this, getting to chat with awesome people and getting to learn so much, having more understanding of what you can do and how to play, and it makes me even more excited about this silly 18 Centurion list. Oh, man, that game was close. And I felt like at this point, a 2-3 result was definitely on the cards. I mean, sure, I might come up against something I don't know, but having had that conversation with Nathan, I felt more confident in a new game plan I wanted to try. See if I could eke out a final victory. Let's see what I'm up against. Oh, for fuck! Phil was say it with me, everyone, a super nice guy. I'm not being facetious when I say that, it's just true. What was not a joy in this game was seeing ANGERY on the table. From a performance perspective, this was my worst game of the tournament. And it wasn't that I did badly. This game was another extremely close loss, but it was my worst game because it was so winnable. Something to know about World Eaters is that they are fast. And not just that they literally move very quickly, they also basically only move charge, and fight. The shooting phase is irrelevant, and because they have a lot of buffs that can make them go into combat very quickly, that's what they do. So a World Eater's turn is over extremely fast, and that pace doesn't just make playing them easier, it also works well with the flavor of the army by overwhelming your opponent by not giving them time to think. And I'm not saying that like Bill or that you should roll fast and move the pace of the game on before your opponent's really ready. I'm saying it just gives your opponent less time to really gather their thoughts and work out what they need to do with all their complicated shooting and tactics. Even if you took your time rolling, by virtue of just not doing any shooting and mostly just needing to move closer to your enemy, you don't take that much time on a turn. I was probably foolishly trying to match that pace, not wanting to be put on the back foot and using my new gamepad to keep Bill on his toes as much as he was keeping me on mine. However, playing at that pace at my first 2-game tournament in game 5 definitely caused me to make a bunch of egregious errors. I got the first turn, and this time I deployed everything except the Shrike Bomb on the board. This was good for me as it let me get my jump intercessors onto an objective for cleanse. I couldn't really get engaged on all fronts, so I hadn't positioned correctly for that, and honestly it wasn't really in my game plan. I pushed up 2 repulsors and also both of my incursor units with scouts. I wanted to ensure that I didn't get corn caged again like I did against Adam, so I wanted to get some move blocking in place. If the incursors die, that's whatever, that's fine. I just need to have Bill come out and deal with them, then throw my Centurions around the board to clean up and eventually overwhelm him. I kept a unit of Vanguard veterans and my Techmarine on my home objective with my repulsor in front of that. The Centurions had disembarked and moved up with an advanced roll before the repulsor moved to get them moving to block for any 8-bound coming in. My hope here being that the Centurions go up any approaching 8-bound and then I could throw a repulsor at them and give them less optimal targets. Turn 1, Bill got onto this objective and immediately burned it. After the game, Bill said his plan, if I had stayed back, was to yeet onto the objectives ASAP and burn them all. It'd be a low-scoring game, but he'd have more primary and I'd be stuck. But fortunately, I managed to counter that. Burning this objective was still useful though. We had less to fight over and Bill didn't have to commit any units to holding this objective anymore. He could throw his weight bound around to get them stuck in, which he did. And this was where I made my first big mistake. Round 2 started and I moved some stuff around, got a few kills, did some objectives, and then realized I forgot to pick up my Centurions at the end of Bill's turn. I was so focused on what was happening, I completely forgot my one big tactic. So now I'm a turn off the pace, with the Centurions unable to really get lines of sight on anything. I still managed a good second turn, keeping up on the primary and secondary objectives though. Bill's turn 2 was a thing. Bill managed to get through my Centurions and into my repulsor. Angeron was getting right up in my face. 8-bound got in and managed to tag and kill the repulsor, which exploded. This repulsor explosion might have been the most impactful explosion I've ever seen. D6 damage to anything within 6 inches. Fortunately, my Assault Centurions only took 1 damage, which is quite nice, and I managed to get a casualty of one of the squads of 8-bound. Then this 3-man Devastated Centurions took a casualty. I lost 2.5 Vanguard veterans, and my Techmarine got instantly killed. But in more positive news, I did do a full 6 damage to Angeron. Hugely impactful event, but mostly to me, unfortunately. My other repulsor at this point is surrounded by more 8-bound and Khan, and I really wish that one had exploded. At least at the end of his turn 2, I did pick up my 6 Centurions this time. So my turn 3, drop the Centurions, kill Angeron, bring it down, coming in clutch again to both get Angeron off the table and some points for that, as my only other option for bring it down was a Rhino, and I wasn't really in position to get that, and it wasn't that many points. Things are still looking up. Sure, my home objective is being overrun, but Bill's home objective is currently completely unoccupied. I drop in the Shrike Bomb out of the way so he can't just get his Berzerkers out of the Rhino to deal with them. I put them as far back as possible against any sort of charge so that when the time is right, I can get them onto that home objective and start scoring some points. In response, Bill gets the Berzerkers out to get some center objective work done, taking my incursors off the center objective and trying to solidify his position on my side of the board. I didn't make Bill roll his 50 attacks in melee on my 5 incursors. As much fun as it would be to try and see if it was survivable, it's not. And I don't think Bill would have appreciated having to roll that many dice with a broken finger, so I just picked them up to save some time and keep that pace up. And unfortunately, in my turn 4, my generosity was not rewarded when Bill rolled for his World Eater's army rule and immediately gets 3 6s. Because of course he does. He didn't at any other turn, but now that Angeron's dead... Anyway, yes, Angeron's back, and Bill elects at this point to do a secret mission, because he is actually behind on primary. At this point, my home objective is screwed, so it's probably going to be command insertion. He just needs to deep strike Angeron in, but with Angeron able to go anywhere, it could be shatter cohesion, as a lot of my army is looking defeated. I get marked for death and sabotage, which are excellent draws. Or at least they would be if I didn't completely throw the game in this turn. I just cataclysmic buggery of errors here. Bill put Mark for Death on his core Berzerkers, which was perfect for me. I could drop in my 6 strong Devastating Centurions, wipe them for an easy 5 points, get Sabotage on a terrain piece on his home objective for another 6. The problem is, in my haste to try and get primary, because that was the thing I was worried about losing on, I decided to burn his home objective instead. Why? I could have waited. I could have done Sabotage this turn and burnt it in turn 5. And just to make matters worse, I didn't even kill the Berzerkers. In my infinite wisdom, I shot at them with my Assault Centurions Hurricane Bolters first to try and flick some wounds off. And I did. But by doing that, I dropped the squad from 10 to 9 models, meaning that my Devastating Centurions missiles just lost 6 shots from the lower blast. Idiots! And just for the cherry on top, I only fired missiles at them and got greedy and fired the las cannons at the 8-bound. Yes, I got rid of the 8-bound, but a combination of a good feel no pain saves from Bill and my absolutely shocking D3 damage rolls, like literally half of them were 1 damage for fuck's sake, 1 remained, meaning that I'd have to wait till round 5 to finish them off. I didn't even do Sabotage for a smaller points amount because the Assault Centurions had to go help kill Khan. So in my turn 4, I got 0 secondary points. I got those 11 points a turn later. My tactical blunders just kept getting worse by aiming at the 8-bound and not the Rhino. In Bill's turn 4, he was able to move the Rhino up and block me from being able to remove my Devastating Centurions from the board. He didn't charge. He only had to be within 3 inches, because if he charged, I might have actually killed it in melee, which would have ruined the plan. And that meant that ANGERY was able to get onto my home objective and just sit there for the secret mission. If I'd aimed at the Rhino and killed that along with the Berzerkers, it would have been trickier for Bill to get an angle which would have protected ANGERY, and I could have teleported my Devastating Centurions and potentially killed it, blocking Bill's 20 points. But even if I didn't do that, if I just got those points on turn 4, I would have got a new cards for turn 5, and this 7-point deficit might have been turned around. I lost 76 to 83, and it was just due to making some really silly mistakes. Still, it was a fun game, and I think I'd learned enough from the rest of the tournament to really improve my game. So my day 2, although it was 2 losses, they were 2 well-fought and close defeats rather than complete stomps. I definitely felt confident in my abilities, but trying to keep your brain working through 5 games is tough. It's something that I reckon will come with practice and time, and practice is what I want. I had an absolute blast, met some awesome people, and I've already decided to do another one-day event that's happening this weekend to give the 80 Centurions another whirl. The South Coast Super Major has completely revitalized my love for this game, and being able to share that and learn from other passionate players is super cool. I got to see some incredible models, including this absolute fucking nightmare of a Chaos Army. Jesus fucking Christ, what the fuck is this? I got to play against some awesome players, hang out with some great people, and generally have an absolutely wonderful time. There's still that cynic in me that understands people's trepidations, and I'm not here to invalidate other people's experiences who have had a bad time. I imagine if my first game was terrible and that put me in a bad mood, I'd struggle to find fun across 5 games, and that would sour me on the whole experience. But I didn't have a single game against anyone that I describe as not fun. So I encourage people to give it a go. Your chances of finding the fun there are way higher than having a bad game. Even if you're new, just try it out. Don't worry about the meta. Most people here don't. Unless you're going to try and win the whole thing, which you probably shouldn't for your first one. Just go there to play some excellent games against some wonderful people who also just want to play some 40k. You'd be hard pressed to find a better place for it. Players who go to these events all the time aren't going to be upset if you're new. All the experienced players I went up against were super respectful and helpful and offered great advice. They want more people in the hobby. They want to help you. They want to share their experience and knowledge and want you to have a good time, so you'll come back again. You'll see horror stories on social media about the bad experiences and dickhead players, and I see comments under them saying things like, this is why I only do narrative, or this is why competitive is ruining 40k, but you aren't hearing the thousands of positive experiences you get at places like this. Don't let the internet echo chamber get you down. And I'm sorry for hammering on at this point for so long. I just really want to try and negate some of that negativity with my positive experiences. Okay, so with all that out of the way, what's next for the Screaming Ravens? Like I said, I've got another tournament coming up, just a single day, 3-game event. With my newly acquired knowledge and experience, I'm thinking I could try and get a 2-1 record. Or at the very least, if I go 0-3, there'll at least be closer losses. Starting most of my army on the board makes a lot of sense. I'm debating whether to start Shrike alone or keep the bomb. I think the bomb is still useful, but in the game against Bill, Shrike didn't really need his entourage to actually do what I needed him to do. But I still think it's extra protection in other situations, and also it's still a nasty hammer unit with the 5 extra veterans in there. For the Vanguard veterans, I'm going to try swapping out the Inferno pistols for shields, just to give them some more staying power on the board. This is really rough for me because I love Inferno pistols, but they aren't that useful compared to having my few units staying alive for longer. This is where I need to walk that very fine line between keeping the Screaming Raven's flavor alive and not falling into the pit of trying to make everything super competitive and meta. But I think this is the right choice in this situation. If I wanted to go full meta, I'd replace these guys with jump intercessors or something. So I'm not fully competitive pilled yet, don't worry. That's basically the only list change. There's a few different strategies I've thought about for how to play this list. I'm tempted to potentially start the 6th squad in strategic reserves and use the uppy downy strat on a 3-man blob for that cool pincer move, giving me more angles and chances to use them, as my 6-man really doesn't do much in turn 1. I also thought about taking 2 lots of 3 Devastator Centurions in the repulsors instead of the Assault Centurions, with the Assault Centurion starting on the board near the front edge of my deployment zone to walk up and be a blocker. Now, these 2 repulsors going around, disembarking Devastator Centurions and deleting something with all of that las cannon. If they get charged, the Devastator Centurions can just jump back into the car and, assuming the repulsor doesn't get wrapped, can escape for the next turn. This might be a bit risky though, as having the Devastator Centurions on the board is a nice deterrent. It gives me more lines of fire, and foot slogging the Assault Centurions will be a pain in the ass. Though they're still slow to get into melee because they can't jump out and charge after the repulsor has moved. Maybe I should have gone with the Land Raiders, but repulsors are just cooler in my opinion. And if I wanted a Land Raider, I'd want the Redeemer, but they're way more expensive points-wise. I'll definitely be looking for more 2-day events. It was nice to be able to go to one so local, just 30-minute drive up the road from me, but there's a lot of events out there that I could go to that are a bit further afield. When will I go to one? I don't know, but I'll let you know if I'm going to one, and if you do see me, come up and say hi. I'm the bald bearded one. Ignore the fact that it describes 50% of the attendees, just... you'll work it out. And I really do think that 18 Centurions has play. I want to actually get some good results with this absurd list. So I'm going to keep honing my skills and seeing what I can do. It's absolutely a complete meme list, to be honest, but it's so much fun. I just love these wide gun toting, 2 thick coats of armor, stompy badasses. And I don't know how people can hate them. People often ask me what I would do if Games Workshop ever sent Centurions to Legends. And really that's a daft question because I don't need to think about it, because Games Workshop are never going to be sending Centurions to Legends if they know what's good for them. Thank you very much for watching this very long video. If you enjoy this, like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And if you want to support me going to even more of these events with my off-the-wall insanity meme list, you become a member or patron like all of these enablers. Your support really helps secure the future of this channel and gets you access to the super secret supporters club, where we're drafting up plans to overthrow Games Workshop and write our pro Centurion manifesto in the unfathomable event that GW does decide Centurions to Legends, like complete dense motherfucker.